Hello again, and welcome to Brainy Films. We're going to see a film today that is really, the reason for seeing it is it's a very good film, it's very entertaining, but I'm looking at Sam Shepard. Sam Shepard was one of our greatest playwrights in America. He was a singular person. He became an actor sort of by accident. He's also a great writer. He wrote great short stories. This film was made in 1991, and it's a very interesting film. We're going to watch it mostly because of him. As you know, he died very recently, and I want to talk about him, and I want to talk about this film is a great example of how some of these films get made, why they get made. But it's Sam. Sam is what we're concentrating on. Sam Shepard, as I said, was a playwright, and he got talked into doing films because of Terrence Malick. And most of you probably know, well, Terry Malick is what everybody, so we'll call him Terry, even though we don't know him intimately. But Terry Malick is this rogue filmmaker, and he makes films. People either love them or hate them. I'm one who loves them, but most people say, I don't know what was going on. It was too long. They are. Sometimes you don't know what's going on. Sometimes they are too long. But he made a film called Days of Heaven, which I am hoping that you will watch as a follow-up to this class. And it was the first film Sam Shepard made. And he apparently just called up Sam Shepard and said, I think you should do this. We'll let Sam explain it.
I know that it's great fun to intellectualize Terry's films, and you can do that. But for me, they're not intellectual so much as they're visceral. I don't know how you explain it. They're like poems, you know. You can analyze it to death, but it still is not going to get to what this poem is doing to you, to your psyche, your body, it's never gonna solve that. Terry was very shy, which enamored me to him immediately. I mean, he was so shy. He was so almost embarrassed about asking me about the possibility of acting, And I hadn't really considered it. I mean, I was totally devoted to writing at that point, And then he started talking about the script. He didn't even show me the script, At that time I was running a little ranch up in Northern California, and he came and visited me and 2 or 3 times. And then one day I got a phone call. He says, do you want to do this movie? I said, why not? So I rented a Ford Mustang and drove to Alberta, Canada. That was it. I love the predicament and the situation and the era. He said something to me once about that he prefers the past. He thought there were more possibilities because of memory and time passing. So that it's really more about memory, about something recalled, something coming back. And the fact that it was that curious time, particularly in the Southwest, the turn of the century time, when the horse was being pushed out and the car was coming in and the train was coming in and all of the industrial thing was moving in. And, we get so carried away with this thing of, like, progress. Because it's always called progress, right? Because we were exploiting the land or we were marching forward and it was manifest destiny and all this other shit, But the center is the collision of these cultures, this Eastern culture and this Western culture, this urban and rural collision that happened in America. It's a very crucial time. Officially, I think the frontier was closed in 1890, something like that. That's the end of the frontier. But in fact, the frontier was very newly discovered by the European population. So you still had this sort of very primitive culture being bumped up against by Eastern influence, I mean, it's still very raw, primitive kind of existence, you know, out there in the hinterlands, you know. The characters seem to be icons of that era and that place. This figure is very typical of that place, you know. A man who tries to create a dynasty and succeeds, but yet is extraordinarily empty and alone, and never will, that will never be resolved, you know. You know, like the Citizen Kane character, it's the same, except rural. And it's a haunted character. It's a character who never has a true home.
Sam Shepard was riveting on screen. And this sort of brings up the question of, what is it? I mean, what is this quality, this presence on screen that can hold your eye? He was not a trained actor, but when he's on the screen, you are watching him. We know from discussions of people who were in Voyager with him, Julie Delphi especially, that he had his own, in quotes, method. He took acting very, very seriously, and he took the role in this particular film, Voyager, very, very seriously. But he had a presence, and I challenge you to take your eyes off of him. He internalized the character, and in this case, presented a really conflicted man. What the writer, who was a Swiss man, was really writing about in the screenplay was from his original book. And that was to address the politics, basically, in Switzerland. In the Second World War, Switzerland remained neutral and let this carnage go on all around them. I mean, that was his view. And obviously, he thought somebody should take a stand. He wrote a book. It was very, very closely shadowing his own life, not in the particular aspect of the film that pops up in the middle, but the experience of the love affair with the German girl who was Jewish in the beginning was his, and he wrote about that. And his conscience weighed on him a long time about Switzerland, and so in the book, there is much more emphasis on the guilt of standing by, on the guilt of not stepping up and doing something. It's so well portrayed in the film, though. This is not so obvious, but the Sam Shepard character is non-emotional. He's a man who wants to live his life. Of course he wants to be in love and he wants to love this woman, but he doesn't want to really be encumbered by anything. He's just going to live his life. And she's a very strong-willed, intelligent woman, and she says basically to him, that is really not good enough for me.
Now he's on a voyage, back to his youth, to his past, to a surprise too shocking to imagine. Starring Academy Award nominee Sam Shepard, Julie Delpy, and Barbara Sakawa, Voyager. 2 thumbs up, Siskel and Ebert. Sexy and compelling, Rex Reed. Sam Shepard gives his finest screen performance, Peter Travers.
Ironically, Sam Shepard was afraid to fly. And in this film, an airplane crash plays it sets off the whole thing. But Sam Shepard literally couldn't fly. He would drive places, he would take boats places. So here's this big plane crash. Obviously, it's not that he had to be in the plane crashing, but it was just ironic. So the director, who was a German director, said, we have to have this plane crash. And this has to be, a big deal, a big scene. So they went all over the country and found some retired TWA pilots who had put together an old Constellation, which is type of plane not made anymore. They kind of put it together. They weren't sure it would ever fly, but they did it out of love. Got hold of them, said, this is the film we're making. A constellation is going to crash and we're going to photograph it. They got it so it was airworthy, and they actually filmed it in the air. You're going to see it. And then it crashed, and they filmed it. And of course, there was no CGI then. They actually set this whole thing up and filmed it. And it's really fascinating how they did this.
You know, it's funny how we keep bumping into each other.
You're the one who dragged me on this plane, right?
It's my job.
I've been having some bad luck with bathrooms lately.
Well, what is that supposed to mean?
This picture was a headache, not only because of the Greek tragedy and the intricate structure and all the deeper meaning. No, it was production-wise, it's a headache. I mean, all the traveling, and also we needed this enormous and unique prop, a super constellation. Now, when we started to inquire and to look for it, there were only one or two left cruising in the Caribbean, but mostly transporting drugs. There was not a single super constellation in service for a private airline anywhere anymore. My production designer, Nikos Perakis, who had done all the recce in South America and in Greece and everywhere, he went out to look for a super constellation, and he finally found an association of former TWA pilots located in Kansas City, and they had an association called SAC, Save a Connie. And they had put together an airplane, nothing inside, no seats, but they had 3 of the 4 engines running. And with the $10,000 we gave them, they went out somewhere in California and found the 4th engine. And finally, after a long fiddling, and this took on month, these pilots, who were all beyond retiring age, actually I think the navigator was almost 80, because they were still navigating by the stars in those days, they got this plane airborne. And they took it, they flew it from Kansas City to somewhere in Arizona, where we had found a stretch in the desert, or a tarmac of a former military airport, where they could land, and we piled up a lot of sand left and right off the airfield, so that it really looked as if he was landing in the sand. And then we had set up a number of explosions alongside, and as he skidded along the tarmac, these explosions went off as if the plane was blowing off the sand. I mean, for us it was a big production by European means, but we didn't have all the Hollywood special effects. So this is the way we managed. And then we cut and we showed the airplane next morning. Now we had with bulldozers a big hole in the sand, and this aircraft, finally airborne with all engines working again, was wrapped in plastic and buried in the sand. Just imagine the pilots. Yeah. Well, it all went fine. It is still written on the side of the airplane, SAC, which means Save a Connie, and we transformed it and it said it was South American Aviation Company.
Well, the movie, aside from that, talking about the narrative, it got sort of mixed reviews. Everybody loved Sam Shepard. Everybody loved Julie Delpy. Everybody loved Barbara Sokowa, whom you probably recognize from Hannah Arendt. She did a quite remarkable performance there, but she's a German actress. Everybody loved the acting. They loved the filming. Why not? Filmed all over the world. This is an old-style movie. I mean, they took months. They traveled all over the world filming all these beautiful things. The ending is, I'd say, a little suspect, you know, and some of the plot points that move the plot along in the end. But I'm always urging, I don't care about that. What it got us to in the end was a final scene. Sam Shepard, Barbara Sakawa, these were two people. They were very, very believable. Maybe it was a little hokey, how they got there, but very believable, of two sort of middle-aged people accepting their fate in life. The book, the original book, which is interesting, and we'll talk about in emails because I don't want to go into it here to spoil things, ended differently. And here brings the point up about films. They felt it was just too much of a negative downer. That people, when you go to see a film, there's only so much you can take with a downer ending. And so they switched the ending a little bit. But I thought the ending was perfect. Personally, also, I do want to say this when you're watching the film. The character of the mother, the German Jewish woman who somehow, some miracle survived, this in life, survived the war in Germany when she went back. Her character, to me, as filmed, of course, the great acting of Barbara Sakawa, I mean, this is acting, is a fascinating character because it leaves you, I hope, after the film thinking, what was she thinking? How did she organize her life after that? We don't see a whole lot of her relationship with her daughter, but then you stop and you think, no, this was a mother-daughter relationship, and I think they were honest with each other and were able to talk with each other. So that character that's sort of underwritten in the screenplay is a very, very interesting one. This screenplay was based on a book by a Swiss writer, and it was called Homo Faber. This, I think, is interesting. The director, who was German, writer Swiss, director German, had read this book, and it had, was like one of his favorite, carried it with him all over the world. He came to United States. He directed very successfully some films, and then his whole life sort of went, psh. Marriage broke up. He was in New York. He was going broke. He wasn't getting any job offers. And he says, came out of his grimy place in Hell's Kitchen that he was living and thought, Homo Faber. That, I understand that guy. I understand that middle-aged guy who suddenly goes backward in his life and starts thinking about all this, reviews his life, doesn't know how to go forward. I want to make the movie of that. So he contacted the Swiss writer, found out the rights were available. Then you try to get the financing, and then all the financiers, but this was 1991, so it's not now. Now it would be impossible. And they said, fine, we'll give you the money. However, it's got to have an American cast to it. Number one, it's got to be in English. People will not go and watch movies and read subtitles. This has since changed. I mean, none of us like to do it, but most everybody who's watching a film seriously is willing to put up with subtitles to see the real thing. But in 1991, no. So they said, we'll cast an American, and the first one that came to mind to him, because he'd seen Days of Heaven, was Sam Shepard. He said that he could do it. That guy could do it. Cast him, agreed to do it in the English language. They then agreed that they would put up the money to shoot at all these gorgeous locations. Julie Delpy it wasn't her first film, it was her second film, but she was a remarkable addition because it had to be youthful and bursting with life as to this guy who is kind of slowing down and not sure where he's going. An aging sort of Lothario. So that was the background for the film. The director made it. It got terrific reviews as far as acting goes, as I've told you. But that's how these films get made. And we have Sam Shepard now on film. And he's the one that we're really honoring.
I took her out to dinner once.
You're a liar.
Okay, twice. Born Steve Rogers in 1943, Shepard was the son of an Army officer who Sam later described as, quote, a drinking man, a dedicated alcoholic. And many of Shepard's characters are loners and drifters. In a 1998 documentary on great performances, Shepard spoke of his writing and coming to terms with his own family history.
It suddenly occurred to me that I was maybe avoiding a territory that I needed to investigate, which is the family. And I avoided it for quite a while because to me there was a danger in I was a little afraid of it, particularly around my own man, and all of that emotional territory. I didn't really want to tiptoe in there, and then I thought, well, maybe I better.
Shepard was also a renowned actor, appearing in the 1978 film Days of Heaven.
What did you want from me?
He reached Hollywood stardom and received an Oscar supporting actor nomination for his portrayal of pilot Chuck Yeager in The Right Stuff in 1983.
It takes a special kind of man to volunteer for a suicide mission, especially when it's on TV.
Many other roles would follow, including the recent Netflix series Bloodlines. A man of many roles and talents, he published a work of fiction earlier this year. Shepard wrote more than 45 plays in all. Many of them continue to be performed regularly around the country and abroad. Shepard had 3 children, 2 from his 30-year relationship with the actress Jessica Lange. Sam Shepard died Thursday at his home in Kentucky of complications from ALS, known as Lou Gehrig's disease. He was 73 years old.
Really horrendous. And Sam Shepard was somebody who made friends for life. Not, his ex-wife, Jessica Lange, they weren't, still close, but they were respectful of each other. I don't know how many of you know, but I think it's very interesting that he and Patti Smith, the rock singer, had this very well-known love affair when they were very young in New York together. It's an odd couple, I'll say. I couldn't believe it when I first read Sam Shepard and Patti Smith. But Patti Smith, of course, is another of my icons. I just think she's the most creative person and wonderful. So when he died in his home, which ended up being a very simple farm in Kentucky, this May, I think everybody gathered. Patti Smith said she was in Switzerland at the time that he died, and she wrote an incredible thing in the New Yorker, if you've not seen it. I'll try to include it here. But this was, you talk about icons. This was a real American creator, and I did want to honor him.